Billy Luna.
As the saint was burning in Sammy's hands, Paul looked him in the eye and said, if you ever betray the secrets that you've learned here tonight, or betray our secret brotherhood, your soul will burn in hell like the saint is now burning in your hands. Sammy the Bull Gravano's big night, the night that he's made, the night that he is born into the secret brotherhood of Cosa Nostra.
Please subscribe to the Billy Luna channel and like the video.
For a few years now, Sammy the Bull Gravano had been a loyal associate in the crew of his sponsor and mentor, Gambino capo Tato Orello, who was more than that to Sammy. He was more like a father to Sammy. The day had finally come for Sammy the Bull Gravano to become a made man. Sammy knew that he was a good associate and he was very close to Tato, and he realized that he was going to soon be made. In fact, he heard some rumors. He kind of knew that it was coming. Tato Orello tells Sammy, meet me at the club tomorrow and dress up. So Sammy meets there with Tato and his son Charlie. Charlie, Orello, and Sammy were both dressed in their finest suits. They really knew what was going on. So Tato drives Sammy and his son Charlie to a home in Bensonhurst, owned by a Gambino family member named Frankie DeWap. When they get there, the living room is filled with a bunch of guys all dressed in nice suits. These guys are also going to be made. So Sammy takes a seat among them, and then one at a time they're calling guys down to the basement of this house. This is the biggest day of Sammy's life. He feels like he's living in a movie. His adrenaline is pumping. His senses are crisp and clean. One by one, these other guys are getting called down. And then finally, it's Sammy's turn. As he walks down the stairs, each of the old wooden stairs creaks. Sammy said that he was moving in slow motion going down those stairs. As he got to the bottom of the stairs, there was a glow, and the room was filled with cigar smoke. And at the other side of the room was a large table. Sitting at the head of the table was Paul Castellano, the boss of the family. On his left was Aniello Dellacroce, the underboss of the family. Next to Neil Dellacroce is the Consigliere, Joe and Gallo. The other people at the table were all Gambino family capos and guys who had just been called down before Sammy. Also there at the table is Tato Orello. There's an empty seat next to the boss, Paul Castellano. Paul says to Sammy, Sammy, sit down in this chair right here next to me. Sammy takes a seat. Paul looks Sammy dead in the eye and says, Sammy, do you know why you're here? And this is the one thing that Tato had told Sammy. You must always answer this question, no, I don't know why I'm here. It's a lie. Everyone who's in this position knows why they're there. They know they're going to be made, but that's one part of the protocol. And anybody who's made, that's the first question that's asked, and you always have to start off with a lie. So you always begin your journey to becoming a made man with a lie. Sammy said he did not know why he was there that evening. The boss, Paul Castellano, then asked him, do you know everybody here? And Sammy said, yes, I know most of these guys. And he said, do you like everyone here? And Sammy said, yes, I do. Paul then said to Sammy, you know that this is a secret society, a brotherhood. And Sammy said, yes. Then Paul went on to explain to Sammy, in this secret society, it's blood in, blood out. You come in on your feet, you go out in a casket. Once you start this journey, Sammy, there is no return. Sammy said, I understand. Paul said to Sammy, would you put this thing above everything else in your life, make us number one? And Sammy said, yes. Paul then said, would you kill for us? And Sammy said, yes. Paul then said, which finger would you use to pull the trigger? And Sammy put up his right finger. Then Tato stood up at the other side of the table and came around. And then Paul Castellano stood up, Neil Dellacroce stood up, and the Consigliere, Joe and Gallo, stood up, and they gathered around Sammy. Tato took Sammy's right index finger and he punctured it with a needle. And then he squeezed it so that the blood dripped onto a Catholic funeral card with a saint. And then Paul Castellano comes over and picks up the card and lights it on fire, and it just starts burning in Sammy's hands. The other guys would take the saint card when it was burning and kind of move it back and forth between their hands so it wouldn't burn them. But Sammy was just so caught up in the intense moment, he just stood there like this, and he ended up getting like blisters all over his hands from where he just let the card burn. As the saint was burning in Sammy's hands, Paul looked him in the eye and said, if you ever betray the secrets that you've learned here tonight, or betray our secret brotherhood, your soul will burn in hell like the saint is now burning in your hands. Paul made Sammy repeat this back to him. Paul Castellano said a few things to Sammy then in Italian that Sammy did not understand. And then Dellacroce told him to dump the ashes of the saint into an ashtray and to rise and to kiss Paul the boss on both cheeks. Sammy did as he was instructed. Then Sammy went around the table and he kissed every person at the table on both cheeks. Then Paul said, Sammy, come back down here and sit down. Sammy came back around and sat down, and Paul remained standing, and then the rest of everyone at the table stood up, and they did what's known as a tie-in. They all joined hands, except for Sammy. And then Paul said in Italian, in honor of our brotherhood, I untie the knot. And everyone let go of the hands. Then Sammy was told to stand up, and he joined hands. And then Paul said in Italian, in honor of our brotherhood, I tie the knot again with Sammy. And Paul grabbed him by the shoulder and looked him in the eye and said, now you are a member with us. You are a friend of ours. Sammy felt like he was high. Everything was in slow motion for Sammy. He was now a made man. And Sammy was then told to take another seat at the table, and another man from upstairs was brought down and went through the oath with Paul Castellano. Once everyone was tied in that was there, Paul Castellano explained some rules. Paul explained that they are the Gambino family, that he was the boss, the representante, the father. Dellacroce is the underboss. Joe and Gallo is the consigliere. Then the captain stood up and they were all introduced to Sammy. Paul then explained how you meet another made man. I'm sure you've all heard this before. A made guy cannot walk up to another made guy and say, hi, I'm a made guy. He needs a second made guy to introduce him, to say, this is Sammy, he's a friend of ours. Whereas if he was introducing somebody who was not a made guy, he would say he's a friend of mine. But if you're going to introduce a friend of yours who's also a made guy to another made guy, you say he is a friend of ours. Paul then went on to explain that there was 5 families in New York. Their family, the Gambinos, the Genovese, the Colombo, the Lucchese, and the Bonanno. He also went on to say that there is the Cavalcante family, a smaller family in New Jersey. He also went on to touch on the Bruno family from Philadelphia, the Trafficanti family from Florida, and a few other families from around the country. Paul went on to explain that there was a commission made up of the bosses of the families that determined policy and settled disputes. He then went on to explain that you go directly to your captain or capo for anything that you might need. You never go to the boss. You always go through the chain of command. There's an insulated chain of command, and if you need something, you go to your immediate superior, captain or capo. However, if your boss calls out to you, that's the one time you do not tell your capo. You just go right to see the boss, because the boss might be telling you to whack out the capo. That's a very, very rare occurrence, but in that instance, you would not seek approval or notify your capo. You just go straight to the boss if the boss calls you. Paul also goes on to say that you can't kill without permission. You can't do anything without permission. Everything must go through the chain of command. And then he talked about honor. You can't go with another made man's daughter or wife or girlfriend, and you can't raise your hands to another made man. All of these rules if broken, you will be murdered for. Paul also says that if your boss calls you, you must come in. If you don't, you will be murdered. Paul then went on to say, you are all reborn anew today into this family. The past is the past. Any beefs or grievances that you have with anybody else, you forget it. Your life starts again today. Cosa Nostra must always come first. Paul goes on to say, if your boss calls you, you must come in. It doesn't matter if a family member of yours is sick and dying and has 5 minutes to live. You must drop what you're doing and go in immediately. If you don't, you will be murdered. Castellano went on to sum up and say, there is no country, there is no government, there is no God. Your God from this day forth is our thing, this thing of ours, Cosa Nostra. Paul Castellano simplified it further, and he said, I am your God. After the ceremony, they all stood up and untied the knot again. Trays of food were brought in and drinks. Sammy's head was on fire. He was elated. It was a party. He had been born. This is a new beginning for him. Then afterwards, the party broke up, and Sammy and Tato and Charlie Boy, Tato's son, now Sammy and Charlie were both made men, went over to Tato's club. And at Tato's club, Boozy DeChico was there. Boozy DeChico was a soldier in Tato's crew. Boozy was also the father of Sammy's close friend Frankie DeChico, who'd also just recently been made. Boozy is called over by Tato. Boozy knew what was going on, but just for the formality's sake, Tato says, hey Boozy, I want you to meet Sammy, a friend of ours. And once again, this is the way you have to meet a made guy. And Boozy was just really happy because him and Sammy were pretty close. This was the first time Sammy was introduced as a made guy, and it gave him chills. This is a new chapter in Sammy's life, his rebirth, his genesis.
Billy Luna.
This is Victoria Luna. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the videos, and share with your mates on social media. Check out these awesome videos now. Ciao.